Hi, Rich Hoffman here. Remember when I got kicked off of LinkedIn? I was doing my book, doing media for my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, and LinkedIn was all very cozy. You know, they kind of do this networking for professionals kind of thing. But really lingering in the background is the dedication they have to the expansion of the Chinese economy. Chinese being overt communists, and LinkedIn's always been very cozy with them. So when I was doing my media for my book, and I was talking about specifically, when I was kicked off of it, talking about decoupling from China and the strategy for how to do it, and that it was quite possible China was a lot more vulnerable than they'd like everybody to think they were, and that it wouldn't take much to completely destroy them economically, in a war. And they've been very hostile to the United States. Never ever forget what they did with COVID and when they did it. Even though people don't like to admit that what really occurred when it comes to COVID, it was a hostile act, an act of war, and they released it from China during an election year when they wanted to get rid of Trump because of these tariffs. When the tariffs started being talked about at the end of 2020, end of 2019, going into 2020, and the last year of Trump's first term in office was going to take place. China didn't like the tariffs, and COVID was released from Wuhan within weeks of all that going on. So don't ever forget what they did. They've been very hostile. If you've ever read the book Unrestricted Warfare, you understand that they know that they can't, communism can't beat capitalism. So the only reason that they've been able to grow is because globalists have sought to loot the wealth of the United States, prop up China as a communist country, and then use that centralized authority to run the world. From a kind of a United Nations standpoint, the created state of China being the exhibition of what a global world order would look like. And they've propped it up with wet paper cards. It's not ever been a sustainable model, only with looted wealth from the United States. So when I talked about all that stuff a couple years ago, getting with the release of my book, Reid Hoffman and the people at LinkedIn, who are very cozy with China, Ray Dalio, those types of people that have built the entire economy and invested all this money in the direction of propping China up. And people say, well, we've lost trillions of dollars in the stock market since Trump's been in office. Those were propped up numbers by people who have been, with the help of the Federal Reserve, have been building this bubble, this big bubble of economic value that has made China powerful. And they never were that powerful. They, on their own, even though they have over 1 billion people in their country, left to their own devices without stolen wealth in a communist country, they can't do much of anything. And most of the industry that they're touting is dependent on the American economy to sell to. And it's been wealth redistribution. So, long story short, they're not going to win this trade war. And this is something that we should have done years ago. Again, when I wrote my book, and everyone was trying to say, oh, get that guy off LinkedIn. And they sent me a letter, and I had to formally apologize and all this stuff to get back on, which I haven't done. And don't plan to do it because they were wrong, and who needs them? If you're going to be an apologist for Chinese and takeover of the United States, for a globalist world order, and you're working against the United States to make that happen, that's your problem. You should be suffering for those decisions. And so of course you hear how the economic media out there, those very people are very panicked because they thought that it was going to be a certain way, that the Chinese were going to be the new players in the world, and they were going to be ushered straight into the throne of ruling the world at the expense of the United States. And so now Trump got elected. He's got trade tariffs, and Chinese think they're going to play hardball and be tough and penalize all the stuff that they make there that's so cheap. That has really kind of trashed our economy. And while everybody likes to go to Walmart and get cheap stuff and have a standard of living that could buy a whole bunch of things for almost nothing, there was always a cost to all that. So you either do it now, you do it later, or maybe you don't survive at all. But your best chance of survival is to fix it now. Cut the bleeding off of the wealth redistribution that's been happening, and make it centered around the economy that really drives the world anyway, and that's the United States. And so China can go out there and they can do their little communist tactics and play their little games. But what's happening with the Trump administration, with full support of the MAGA movement, people like me, I've been saying it forever, and this is why Trump had to get elected when he did. And you had to have somebody who was willing to negotiate and play hardball with the Chinese, because up to this point, there really hasn't been anybody. There hasn't been anybody really understood how economics works, that sat in the executive office and could push back against the advisors who are trying to steer every president for decades into globalism run by China. So that's been taken away from them in Trump's first term, and he's able to pick up where he left off from the last year of his previous term, where the Chinese, conspiring with many other factions, conspired to get rid of Trump. And of course, we know we had election fraud and all kinds of bad stuff that happened in 2020 and 2021. Joe Biden was essentially the communist insurgent placed into the executive office, which was why they wanted nobody who was easy to beat running the executive branch so they could prosper. And now it's gone from them, and they're very upset about it. But for anybody's out there that doubts whether or not where this is all headed, China will not win. China cannot win, and this is all going to hurt China far more than the United States. When everybody's out there saying my goods are going to go up, and these tariffs are going to cost me an arm and a leg, and I won't be able to stay in business. Remember what they did when they shut down everybody's businesses for COVID. Remember the kind of nonsense they thrust out upon us. You could shut down for weeks and months at a time, and everybody was going to stay in business. While China was touting they weren't shut down at all. They were having parties on New Year's Eve and showing that they weren't locked down like the United States was. We've been suckered for way too long, and it's time for them to pay for what they've done in the world. And going back to what I said originally about Lewington and all these other affiliates, these globalists that have been wrapped up in corporate culture and exporting all of our jobs and assumptions outside the borders of the United States to prop up places that otherwise wouldn't be able to make a stick. Because of American ingenuity, they're able to have decent lives and decent jobs. And we've been lured to our demise, and now we're putting an end to it. And China isn't happy about it, and they're going to be very vicious. They've been at war with the United States forever. War is not putting tanks and planes out and troops out there to fight on a battlefield anymore. It's done economically, and it has been for many centuries now. Economic war is far more dangerous than physical asset-based war. And China has been at war with the United States for decades, since they were created, essentially propped up in the 60s by this globalist movement to push all this phony money into their economy and blow their balloon up to look like a big fluffy turkey that could take on all the other turkeys of the world. And that communism will all of a sudden work because of all this wealth redistribution that was stolen from countries that actually produced it, like the United States. And now that spigot's been turned off, and they're very upset. And good for that. I'm happy to see them upset. But don't be intimidated or scared. What's going to happen is it's going to break their back, and they deserve to have their back broken for what they've done over the years. And all these communist losers out there, especially the ones have been running China, they got it coming. And it's time for them to pay up for what they've done. and they're gonna cry and whine about it quite a lot. It's gonna look very scary. You have a media that has a bunch of journalists in it that don't really understand these economic principles. But the basics of the matter are, we are not all one world. We are not all one government. We're values, and America's capitalism is at war with Chinese communism, and the rest of the world falls somewhere in between. And everyone has to pick a side, because you can't have this merged kind of friendship with with communist China working in the background, always to undermine us, which is what they've been doing forever. And then when you talk to them face to face, they're rubbing your back and sending honeypots to everybody's hotel rooms to kind of wash it over. And I hope everybody forgets what they're really trying to do. But they've been very destructive, very aggressive, and they have been trying to destroy us all along. So it's a fair game to throw it back in their face and say we plan to destroy them and decouple them. And when you do that, they will cease to exist, because they can't without stolen money. Which is why they took me off LinkedIn, because I pointed that out with my book years ago and told everybody that the way to break the back of China is not all that hard. It just requires somebody with courage to do it that's in the executive branch. And we now have that in Trump. President Trump's doing a great job, and this strategy is going to work magnificently. And China is going to get coming to them what they deserve and should have had coming to them all along. And if you were doing business with China to participate in this globalism, but you bet on the wrong horse, and you're going to lose stuff as a result because you made a bad decision. I wouldn't cry about it. Just recalibrate yourself and get on the right horse and ride it. But if you bet on the wrong horse, then that's the way it goes. Don't bet on the wrong horse in the future. Good lesson to learn. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. We have a good day. See you later.